The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, it's Saturday afternoon. Hope everybody is having a great time, a great weekend. I know some of you it's still kind of morning on the West Coast, and some of you are in Europe, and it's already evening, already night time in Europe. So thank you all for joining me today. So we're going to talk about Aleksandr Dugin today. I'm not going to make this. This is not. I'm not qualified to make it, and you're not qualified to do an academic seminar on Dugin. I wouldn't want to attend such a seminar. I wouldn't want to prepare the material for such a seminar. I don't think he's important from that perspective. I don't think there's anything to learn from him. But I think it's important that we know who he is. I think it's important that we have a sense of what he is. And given his influence on a nuclear power, given his influence on Aleksandr Putin, given his influence on, I think, more than Putin, but on the leadership, the military leadership, the intellectual leadership, the political leadership in Russia and nuclear power, I think it's important we understand something about his ideas. This is not going to be a comprehensive study of his thinking and his influences. The people who've influenced him are mostly despicable intellectuals who have no interest in reading. I'll give you, maybe we'll have a chance to get a little bit of a sense of what they're all about. So I want to give you, you're going to experience Dugin directly. I'm going to show a couple of videos of Dugin, and we'll kind of bounce around through the video. I'm not sure exactly what exactly we'll cover. We'll see how it moves along and how fast it moves along. I'm mainly using an interview he gave, which is a 2-hour interview that he gave for something called Renegade University. The guy at Renegade University is a complete idiot. But we'll do segments of the interview. The reason I chose that is because it's quite philosophical. It's less political. He's less trying to manipulate the interviewer than he is actually trying to answer questions and have influence. And in that sense, I think it's more useful for our purposes, which is to figure out who he is and what his fundamental ideas are. Most of this is going to be about his metaphysics and epistemology, because I think that is the core of his ideology. I think the politics is a mishmash of a lot of different things. We'll talk a little bit about his politics. So I will interject some stuff that he won't actually say that I've read from him and seen in other interviews. If we have time, I'll just show you an interview which he did in the BBC, just to show you his methodology and to show you how it comes across and how he manipulates, in a sense, Western media, and is very effective. I think is effective. I think at using the West's own weaknesses against it, and that'll be interesting to look at as well. His philosophy is eclectic. He's a little bit of a lot of different things. Don't look for consistency. There isn't. In principle, there isn't. There's no need for consistency. Don't look for logic. He rejects logic. You'll see right off the bat. And I think one of the reasons I want to do this is we talk a lot about bad philosophy, and a lot of it I tell you about. Here you'll hear it yourselves. But also, I want you to see how nutty the world is. I don't think many of you actually know how crazy people really are. This guy is completely nuts, and I mean, not nuts mentally in terms of he's should see a psychiatrist. He's nuts in terms of the ideas that he holds. They're completely detached from reality, and in that sense, he's nuts. And yet he wields massive influence. So part of what I want you to think about is why? Why does somebody like this have so much influence? And it's not just influence in Russia. More and more of the alt-right and of the right are interested in him. I mean, this guy, Renegade University, whatever it is, has some kind of right-wing channel or whatever, and he's interested and is fawning over him. Lawrence Summers, who I've talked about in the past and shown some clips from her, I mean, she's a piece of work. She is fawning over him. I'm not using that video, but there's a video of her interviewing him and then later commenting about, whoa, how amazing he was and how brilliant he is and how, you know, this is the future and this is what needs to be done. So, you know, he is, and then you saw in the video I did about Jordan Peterson, that Jordan Peterson, at the very least, respects him. Give him some respect. This is the philosopher that advises Putin. Putin has a philosopher. And he kind of says, no matter what you think about, you know, we can talk about Dugin, but I think there's some overlap between Dugin and Jordan Peterson. So I like to have you actually listen to the person instead of me just talking about them, and we'll do that. So my qualification is, you know, I'm not an expert on Dugin. You know, I've listened to a bunch of his stuff. I know enough to identify the craziness. I'm not an expert on all the influences he has. I'm not an expert, for example, on Christian Orthodox Christianity, Russian Orthodox Christianity, which he is an adherent of. I'm not an expert on all the different intellectuals and philosophers that he has been inspired by. You know, we can get into a little bit of that, and I'll talk about it a little bit. I think there's a kind of a question. It was kind of I mean, Adam, if you could put that into a super chat, then it'll save it. Even if it's just $5, Adam put it into like a super fan question thing, but it's hard for me to keep track of those. If you can put that into a super chat for a minimal amount, because I know you give so much to the show, then it'll retain in my super chat thread, and I'll promise to get to that issue and cover it and cover the influences of the people you mentioned over him to the extent that I know. But I'll just give you a little outline, a little flavor of who these people are, just so you get a sense of the kind of people who've influenced them. All right, anything else I want to say as introduction? Again, this is just to give you a sense of what's going on over there, Russia, the land that Ayn Rand, you know, thought was hopeless because of its mysticism and collectivism. I guess we'll see. We'll see. Oh, Shazbot has turned Adam's question into a super chat. So Adam, no need, and we will do that. All right. Just to remind you that you can use the super chat feature that YouTube provides, both to support the show and to ask questions. You know, let's try to stick to questions somewhat related to Dugin, Russia, Putin, the war, I don't know, things in there, you know, modernity, what is modernity, because we're going to be talking about that. Let's see, yeah, and any topic like that, modern intellectual world, the alt-right, Jordan Peterson, the right more broadly. So feel free to ask questions about that, anything related to that. That would be great, and that is the super chat. As you know, we have a goal of $650 a show. I will keep you updated about that. Catherine is also here. She'll kind of rah-rah you, but I will keep you updated about that silently, just by posting in the chat where we are. Those of you, just a reminder, those of you who do not listen live and are not part of, can do super chats, a number of ways you can support the show. You can do an applaud. If you watch the video later, there's a little applaud button, and you can make a contribution there. But the best way is through Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals. I think my website might be working again, so you can also try YaronBrookShow.com/support. You can also use PayPal. So pretty much any mechanism you would like, you can find a way to support the show. The best way, from my perspective, for you to support the show is if you do something monthly and it's just automatic, and then I can predict exactly how much money is coming in. Remember, this is paying for the time it takes to prep the shows, to do the shows, to do all the logistics and everything else, to pay Action Jackson to make the short videos and everything else. So, there's significant work that goes into this. I'm asking you to help support that work. Please do so. Monthly contributions are the best, but Super Chat is the most fun. All right, let's jump in. Here is, whoops, that's not the right one. There he is. There's Dugin. Dugin's on the left. I've kind of picked out key moments in this interview. I don't know where I'm going to start, where I'm going to stop, because everything he says, but I want to. There's certain things I want you to hear. There's certain things that are really, really important, I think, for you to hear, because if I tell you he believes this, you might not believe me. So you actually have to hear him say it. He's got the beard going. He's got the look of a Russian philosopher. So in that sense, he's got it going. Let me say that a lot of Dugin's philosophy, and indeed a lot of what we've talked about in terms of the right, the attitude of the right, a lot of that attitude is motivated and driven by a hatred of modernity. A hatred of modernity. And typically, in the US at least, when people talk about a hatred of modernity, what they're really talking about is the left. They hate the left. They hate everything the left represents. They hate they claim to hate the subjectivism, although that's not clear. They hate the gender issues. They hate the socialism. Again, not true in the case of Dugin. They hate the critical race theory. They hate all this stuff. And maybe they hate the culture. They hate modernity, which is represented by the left. Dugin does not hate that modernity. I mean, he hates it. But that's not his definition of modernity. So when Dugin says modernity, it's everything since the Renaissance. Since the Enlightenment. Everything since the Enlightenment. It's Thomas Jefferson. It's the founding of America. It's definitely John Locke and the Enlightenment thinkers. It's certainly Voltaire and Diderot and those guys. It's capitalism. It's free political freedom as manifested in the West since the Enlightenment. It's everything associated with the Enlightenment and everything that's come after. He claims to love classical Greece and Rome, but his interpretation of classical Greece and Rome is bizarre and weird and certainly not. And he claims to be an Aristotelian. He claims in some weird way, but he's not. He's not. So this is just false. But what he hates is the material wealth that we have, or at least the mechanism by which we attained it. He certainly hates everything post-Enlightenment. Right? All right, so let's jump in. This is him. Whoops, he's muted. One second. So this is him talking about modernity. I think this is the right spot. Let me take it back a little bit just to make sure. All right. Let's start there.
And I really challenge that. So in all aspects, I'm not against some secondary details of what is going on. I'm against the modern Western civilization.
That's great. He's not against any particular thing, CRT or this or that. He's not picky and choosy. He's against Western civilization. Everything about Western civilization. He hates and he despises. This is the fundamental thing that's driving him. It's what animates him. Hatred is what animates him, and we'll see what kind of a hatred, but or what the positives are that animate him. But notice in this sense, he's a little different than the American right. The American right, even the alt-right, still has some vestige of reinterpreting the Founding Fathers as somehow a positive thing. And their hatred is primarily towards, and some of them even pretend to be pro-capitalist. Here there is no pretense. You're going to get the raw stuff. The raw stuff. He is so bad. If he was written into Atlas Shrugged, you would say, no, nobody talks like that. I mean, there's a sense in which, epistemologically and metaphysically, maybe not in, that he's worse than Ellsworth Toohey. And that's saying a lot.
That is and was wrong from the very beginning.
And the beginning is the Enlightenment. The beginning is not yesterday. The beginning is not the 20th century. The beginning is not, the rise of, liberal leftism in the United States. It's the Enlightenment. And, I don't know what he would think, but I suspect that he'd be critical of the Renaissance as well. But certainly of somebody like Leonardo da Vinci, he would be. But absolutely.
Modern, from beginning of the modernity, because according to my analysis, in the beginning of modernity, the West has cut its own classical roots. Mm-hmm. So that was the great departure from identity, from Western classical Mediterranean Greco-Roman culture. And modernity was a mistake and crime. Modernity from very beginning. And now we are witnesses of the ending modernity. So modernity has accomplished its own agenda and has achieved its goal. And why there were...
So, and this is important because this is, again, something that you get a lot on the right in the US. It's the world we have today is the logical conclusion of the Enlightenment. The world we have today is the culmination of modernity. That is not the world we have today, the left, the worst parts of the left, and particularly on the social issues, the complete moral subjectivism, what they would call the atomization, the cutting off from any tradition, the critical race theory, the gender identity issues, all of that, that's a direct and logical and inevitable consequence of the Enlightenment and of Thomas Jefferson. And you find this in Dugin, you find this in these American intellectuals, and in Vermeule, you find this in Sohaba Mari. The real sin, the real villain, the destroyer of the world is what we consider the most intellectual, fruitful period in human history, the Enlightenment, right? You'll see, he doesn't like Isaac Newton either.
World we are living in is so terrible because it is perfect and complete realization of agenda of this perverted thing that Western modernity that has colonized everybody else in the time of the so-called great geographical discoveries, and we.
So the so-called great geographical discoveries. So he's even complaining here about the West expansion to all these other countries and bringing Western civilization to them and bringing ideas and bringing, and colonizing them. And why? Because it ruined local culture. It polluted the local primitive ancient cultures that existed there. It ruined it with what? With modernity. What is modernity? What is modernity? What is the Enlightenment? It's reason, which he despises, and the thing he despises even more and actually claims it's a myth, we'll get to that, individualism. He claims the individual is a myth. There's no such thing as the individual. So it's reason and individualism. These are the things that define modernity. These are the things that he hates, and he hates them because he detaches them from two aspects. What does reason detach us from? Reason detaches us from mysticism. As you'll see, he's a complete unapologetic mystic. And individualism detaches us from what? From collectivism, from tribalism, from our roots in a particular ethnic group, in an ethnic tradition. Of course, mysticism and tribalism go hand in hand. I mean, he really is a witch doctor in every respect that Ayn Rand meant in her essay for the New Intellectual, where he talks about Attila and the witch doctor. If you haven't read that essay, it is a must. It is a must read. It explains history.
And all other ancient and very special culture. And
all other ancient and very special cultures, the one that did human sacrifice, and the one that stayed poor, and the ones that gained nothing, the ones that produced nothing, the ones that had, horrible, miserable, short, pathetic lives. They're all gone. How sad.
civil cultures and civilization, we were and are victims of this colonization. But it is not all. The modernity has colonized the past of the West itself. That was double sense colonization, geographical and historical. And only moderns could, from some moment, judge the past, judge the history, judge the religion, judge the tradition, judge what was good or wrong, resembling the modernity or different from modernity. And that was the unique criteria. So
his view is that everything that came before modernity, the past, the ancient civilizations, ancient peoples, Middle Ages, but even before that, right? That's where real truth lies. That's where the human race was at its peak. That is the best. I mean, he gets some of this from, from a guy named a French philosopher, I guess you could call him, René Guénon, I think he is. He lived from 1886 to 1951. Who was studied Hinduism, an esoteric Christian, a real mystic, and he called himself a traditionalist. I don't know if traditionalist is a term he coined or if that already existed, but the traditionalist meant not just tradition like conservatives in America call, but to them it indicates a spiritual wisdom that ancient civilizations had, that had an ancient core, that there was some great religion and spiritual path that existed in prehistory, in not prehistory, but in ancient times, that is, that we are lacking in modernity. And that's why we're so pathetic, why we're so miserable. Yes, the material world is good, but spiritually we're missing, because what we're missing is this ancient source of spirituality which Christianity picks up on, and Christianity has elements of. But to really understand it, you have to combine Christianity with some of this ancient what do you call it, paganism, right? So it's esoteric, mystic. But traditionalism is something they put a capital T on. So it's not the tradition of the West, of conservatives. It's traditionalist. And you'll see if we get to it, he mentions that he's the traditionalist all the time. This is the belief that there's some wisdom, ancient wisdom, esoteric wisdom, mystical wisdom that existed in ancient time that's somewhat captured by modern religion that we have lost and that we need to regain. All right, let's see, where are we here? 9:16. All right, let me skip to 11:11. I mean, all of this is, we could go over every second of this interview, and it's is equally disturbing throughout. All right, he's still talking about modernity.
The modernity is based on some principles. It is not just the new time, because time is always new. So 1 second before was old, and now we are in another second that is new. So modernity is not about a kind of mechanical time. It is the paradigm. It is epistemology.
Right.
And this
So he identifies modernity as epistemological, which is, I think, important and interesting. He's philosophical, right? He understands that core ideas, that epistemological ideas, drive everything else, and most of what he talks about is epistemology.
This modern epistemology is based on the idea that nothing is sacred, that there is only matter, there's only outside world.
So he's going to present modernity as materialism, as pure materialism, which we also criticize. He's going to present two alternatives, a pure materialism, and you'll see what the alternative is. Of course, subjectivism rejects both, but it's interesting to see what he sees modernity as the core of it, right? And what he sees as the alternative to it.
And all the inner experiences of human is just a reflection of the world outside of us. That is materialism. That is mechanical physics. That is idea that the things are moving by themselves or by some inertia, by impulses, by forces that are totally external to the things themselves. And the human being is just the reflection of this material universe. That was Newton's vision. They recognized in the beginning of the modernity, in the early modernity as well, the God as clockworker, a mechanical God, a God or some creator, someone who adjusts the system in order to.
Yeah, so it's like the deists in the Enlightenment. They had a God, but he got things in motion, maybe adjusted once in a while, but he wasn't there on a day-to-day basis. He wasn't a metaphysical force in the world, right?
To function properly, but all that is external. So human subject was reduced to pure reflection. And that was the end of the Christianity.
Yeah, which is, again, modernity is a rejection of Christianity. It's the end of Christianity. He'll repeat that several times.
What Americans could understand, because Americans that I judge to be really worthy are religious people, and that was the basis of the anti-globalist movement. I'm Orthodox Christian. I could not judge the difference between Orthodoxy and Catholicism or Protestantism now. But what is essential, that modernity cut the roots with the sacred transcendental reality. Right. So that was reduction of the human being to be just reflection of outside world. And that was the end of Christian epistemology, that is based on recognition of eternity, of immortality of the soul, and this great inner kingdom, because the words of Christ.
So this, notice the role Christianity plays here. Christianity is significant, and modernity is the beginning of that rejection of Christianity.
Kingdom of God is inside of you, is the first and main principle of internalist epistemology. So if the kingdom of God is inside of us, so everything should be regarded from inside outside, from inside. And that is the human heart, the human being.
So notice here, and this is an important epistemological point, this is important, those of you who studied objectivism will recognize this. What he's advocating for clearly here is a primacy of consciousness. The world out there doesn't matter. It might not even exist, as we'll see maybe later on. What matters is the world inside here. We create the universe out there. God is inside of us. The universe is inside of us. Knowledge is inside of us. Everything is inside of us. And our consciousness creates everything around us. And this is, you know, he properly identifies this. This is fundamentally the Christian epistemology. And this is his great, you know, his great objection to modernity is an epistemology that recognizes that there is an objective world out there and that we have the tools to recognize, understand, integrate the world that's out there. You know, in this sense, he's a bit of a Platonist, right? The concepts are already inside of us. All knowledge is already inside of us. It just needs to be discovered. We just need to discover the thing that we already know. Let's see. I wanted to get to that. Let me move. Okay, I want him to say. I want you to hear him saying something about science, which is pretty amazing. Let's skip a little bit. We're going to go to 23 minutes and 49 seconds. 46. That's close enough.
Of the
So he's talking about modern science. He's talking about Heidegger, you know, Bohr. He's talking about quantum mechanics, the new interpretation of science. We'll get to that, but he's right now. He's talking about where did I put it? 23, 47, 49. Modern science. Modern science. Yeah. Okay.
Falsehood against the truth. I am absolutely sure, following phenomenological tradition, phenomenologists of Husserl, Heidegger, Brentano, the founding father of phenomenology, I'm following that, and I'm following phenomenological reading of Aristotle. Phenomenological reading of Aristotle is, in my opinion, the only one, only correct one.
Yeah, it's the one that turns Aristotle into a mystic. It's truly stunning, the intellectual nuttiness.
So, according to this reading, Aristotle represented the real science, and the modern science that was created on the moment of overthrowing all the principles of Aristotle has created the false reality.
So modern science is Newton, is Galileo, Copernicus, Newton, you know, everything up until the quantum revolution. So modern science is everything, you know, the quantum revolution and on is a postmodern science, but that is the modern science, the science that comes out of the Enlightenment. That, he says, has created a false reality, right? And he says, yeah, let's keep going.
And this reality was imposed on the being. And that was nothing more than the picture, or the map of the reality, not the reality itself. And what is interesting, that the last century, and maybe century and a half, of the development of modern or super modern actual science, contemporary science, is totally in accordance with his critics of modern science. So
he is going to claim that quantum mechanics, string theory, all of this stuff, that is real science. That is consistent with pre-modern science. That's consistent with esoteric science. That is consistent with the ancients. It's, all right. All right, I'm going to skip ahead because there's just, I missed it before, but there's one thing I want to go to 27. Yep. All right, so, okay.
Pauli, they accept that science is nothing but projection of human mind.
Science is nothing but projection of the human mind. Science does not discover reality. Science does not help us understand reality. Science is something we inflict on reality. Science is made up. It's made up. And the sooner we recognize that, the better. Let's see. Let's skip to 31, because I think this is interesting. Because what's the other big movement of a primacy of consciousness that exists out there on the left? What's the big primacy of consciousness movement on the left? Well, that's postmodernism. Again, the idea that there's no real reality, it's just perspective, it's just all driven by your point of view, by your mind. You, in a sense, create reality. When I'm talking about quantum, I'm talking about the Copenhagen interpretation. Clearly, the quantum phenomena is real. It's science, but the question is, the interpretations of it are epistemologically flawed, and some of them epistemologically crazy. All right, let's do this and see if we get a little bit into postmodern.
I am pre-modern by the values concerning the main metaphysical principles, but methodologically I'm postmodern.
So methodologically he's postmodern.
I think that the worst thing is modernity. So we should, I prefer to attack it from both sides, not only.
So he views himself as a right-wing postmodern, and his enemy are left-wing postmoderns. And postmodernism, with all there's no objective reality, there's no objective facts, there's just feeling and emotion. That's what he represents. That's what the new right represents, is a right-wing, and we'll see that in application in another video in a bit. I just want to get one thing. I want to get this statement. And then maybe we'll skip. So let me skip ahead to 3642. And by the way, I'm skipping just because I want to hit kind of the key ideas that he's projecting. I'm trying to get the most outrageous things that he's saying. He meanders and he talks a lot, but I want to give you the core of it, so you get a sense of it, and then I want to see it in application in this interview at the BBC.
Let's start with the construction of individual, not with the construction of God. That is pure abstraction. Individual doesn't exist.
There you go. The individual doesn't exist. The individual is pure abstraction. What exists is the collective. What exists is the group. What exists is a spirit. What exists is the tribe. The individual does not exist. It's pure abstraction. Now think about that. From our perspective, only the individual exists. And indeed, the group is an abstraction, right? You start with the directly observable concrete, the person. This is our epistemology. You start with individual things, and yes, you can abstract them into groups. You start with a chair, and another chair, and another chair. And they all look different, but they all are chairs, and you can understand them all as individual things, and then you make an abstraction, chairs, that represent all of them. You can start with 1, 2, 3, 4 individual human beings, and you can abstract human being, or you can abstract group, or you can abstract society, or you can abstract tribe, or you can abstract country. But the starting point, perceptually, cognitively, is the individual entity. Not for Dugin, not for a mystic, because for a mystic, your observations don't matter. I mean, take Plato. Your observations of a chair doesn't matter. All your observation do is giving you an instance of something that already exists. Chairness, a perfect chair, and you're just matching it. But here there's no even individual in the world of forms. There is only the collective. There's only the group. There's only the tribe. Some mystical spirit. At some point he says, I'm not going to play you this, but he goes into, he's criticizing the left, and he criticizes the left about gender. And he says that he agrees with the left that gender is a social construct. I don't know where that came from, construct. That gender is a social construct, because he says it can't be biology, because he says, I don't believe in biology. Again, biology is a science that explains the world, but the world doesn't exist. Only your spiritual experiences, only your conscious experiences, only what's inside you exists. Biology is fakery. So it's interesting when he talks about postmodernism, when he talks about the fact that he is postmodern, he says that he agrees with the left about postmodernism, but he is a right postmodern. He's a traditionalist with a capital T, which is a right-wing postmodern, which he thinks is the same as pre-modern. So the pre-modern and the postmodern, to him, are the same thing. All right, let's see. And what really matters, he says at some point, class and race don't matter. He rejects fascism and he rejects communism because they focus on race and on class. They're artificial. They don't matter. They're, again, constructs of modernity. What matters is the collective identity we had in the pre-modern time. What matters is that organic, tribal identity that the group had before it was corrupted by concepts of race and class. He rejects fascism. We'll get to that. He thinks fascism, he's gone beyond fascism, and we'll get to that. All right, let's see. I want to play you at 1 hour and 2 minutes. God, I actually listened to this whole thing. All right, there it is, 1 hour and 2 minutes. So just about Russia.
Is here, and everything is already put to some limits. So that is greatest obstacle as during the Second World War, Cold War, during Russian Empire. The Russia is keeper of the alternative order.
So Russia is the keeper of the alternative order. Alternative to what? Alternative to modernity, alternative to the West. And the biggest villain in the West that represents modernity is the United States of America. So Russia must be strong, must be successful, because Russia is the connection back to this pre-modern time. Russia is the preserver of the pre-modern. It's the preserver of true Christianity. It's the preserver of the true spiritual nature of man. Now, connect this with the video I showed you of Jordan Peterson, who considers Russia a part of the West. No, Dugin says, Russia's not part of the West. Russia is the anti-West. Indeed, he says in this video, the West is the Antichrist. The West is the demonic, satanic. Literally, he says these terms, right? Russia is what keeps sanity around, the only chance humanity has. And indeed, his vision for Russia is of an empire that goes from the Pacific to the Atlantic, all the way to Portugal. So he imagines an empire that covers all of Europe and most of Asia as a Russian-centric, mystical alternative to modernity. This is who Jordan Peterson thinks is an ally, right? Jordan Peterson didn't say, well, and another leadership, Russia might be our friend or could be our friend. No. Putin is part of the West. Russia, with Dugin in charge, is part of the West. All right, one other thing. Let's go to 116. All right. I mean, here he rails against individual rights. And then he talks about what Russia, he's talking about human rights. And he's saying, you know, and he rejects concept of human rights. He rejects individual rights, and then he tells us what he thinks is human.
Homosexual marriages.
Yeah.
So that is pure construction, because if you are dealing only with modern Western liberal understanding of what is human. So if the human is individual, so it is individual's rights.
You see, if human is individual, then there's individual rights. But for him, human is not individual. Human, the very concept of human, is a group, is a collective.
Rights. And if you get deeper in this concept, you see that politically it is directed against citizenship. So that...
Like he's a big supporter of citizenship. Why citizenship? Because citizenship is a collectivistic concept. Maybe it could be individualistic, but it's the idea of you being a part of the state. You're a citizen of the state. You have responsibilities to the state. You're part of the group.
The human rights theory opposes the human individual to the citizen, and defends a kind of natural human individual opposed to national states. And just the tool of globalization, just political manipulation, and nothing else. No moral, no serious understanding of human nature, no asking about what the human is. But what is human? It is not easy question. But
so he's going to tell us what is human in just a bit.
Liberals know already the answer. They know everything because they totally maniacs. They follow their cult, their crazy totalitarian cult. That is sect, globalist. And the human rights theory is the weapon of this sect. Because what we are...
So individual rights is a weapon of a sect.
Considered to be human is different from what Biden or Kamala Harris thinks. So we don't think that human being could exist without collective identity, without the roots.
So Russians think that the individual cannot exist without collective identity, without
its relation. The Muslims, all the billion of Muslims, couldn't accept humanity without relation to God.
So relation to God. So what is human? It's collective identity, it's your ethnic, tribal roots, and it's a relationship to God. And it's, I mean, now, so metaphysically, he is out and out, explicitly primacy of consciousness. Epistemologically, reason has no place. It is all about, in a sense, mysticism. It's all about revelation. It's all about discovering your inner world. And it's not even your inner world because you don't really exist. Discovering our collective inner world, our collective spiritual, esoteric experience. He's influenced a lot by Eastern mystics. I think Christian Orthodoxy generally is. Some of his big influencers are people who studied Hinduism and Buddhism quite a bit. So there is no me in any sense. So morally, he's not an individualist. There is no individual. The individual is just one. There's only we, no I. And politically, the way he presents us politically, and let me say this, and then we'll go to the second video. Let me just see if I've got it. Yeah, there's the second video. He looks a little cleaner cut here for the BBC. This is a few years ago, I think. Yes, this is 2016, so he's a little younger, a little cleaner cut. But politically, he believes that modernity has resulted in three different political ideologies. Liberalism, which is the idea of basically individual autonomy, individual liberty. This is classical liberalism. Individual liberty, democracy, individual rights, liberalism. Second is communism, which believes in economic classes and is materialistic and believes only in the material world as deterministic and rejects the spiritual world. Third is fascism, which he claims rejects Christianity, rejects religion in the name of race, which he says is a social construct and doesn't exist, and that has, again, it loses its spirituality, does not know where to find its spiritual base. But of the three, liberalism, I think he thinks, is the worst. Communism is really, really bad because it's pure materialism. Fascism is the least worse, but he believes in a fourth way. And basically what that is he believes that economically we should be socialists. Politically, more fascists. But that we must recognize that the core that unites us is not race. It is this spiritual core. This core that is grounded, is grounded in a prehistory, in our ancestry. So when Russia, for example, takes over all of Europe, he doesn't want to impose, he claims, he doesn't want to impose Russian values he wants every tribe to have its own culture, its own identity, its own spiritual values. And what he wants is in the sense he is an internationalist. He's a globalist because he wants, in a sense, one world government, but one world government that allows every little group within to express itself culturally in any way it wants, to manifest itself with its religion, with its culture, any way they want, because that is the unit that matters. That's the unit that matters. And if you think about Russia, Russia is a collection of large numbers of various ethnic groups. So there is no one Russian ethnic group, Rus or whatever you want to call it. I mean, to the extent that there is, it's the Ukrainians and it's some Poles and it's the Slavics and it's some Russians. But the Russians in the East are not necessarily that related to the Russians in the West. So it's a collection of tribes. And he wants the tribes to be able to maintain their identity. But the key here is he doesn't want the individual to count for anything. Yeah, I mean, the alt-right is super inspired by this. The alt-right, loves Dugin. It was inspired by him and continues to promote his ideas. The reason I'm devoting time to him is two. One, he has an immense influence on Russia. And two, and Russia is, at this point, you could call it an enemy. And two, he has immense influence on at least not influence, but he is certainly potentially influential and certainly in dialogue with the American and European right. And that, of course, is what worries me. What worries me is the American right. And this is a guy who's directly engaged with them in one way or another. They might accept some and reject others, but he's engaged with it. All right, I want to give you a sense of how he uses, he says he's a postmodern, how he uses this postmodernism and what it means. This is a guy that takes the idea that there's no such thing as truth, or the truth is a social construct, seriously, and plays with it. So this is 2016, this is about, post taking over the war in Ukraine, the first war in Ukraine and the taking of Crimea. And this is the BBC interviewing him. So let's see, and we'll probably play the whole thing.
We could use postmodernity in order to explain to the West that if any truth is relative, so we have our special Russian truth that you need to accept as something that maybe is not your truth.
Even if it's not true.
But if the truth is relative,
Yeah,
that
is good.
doesn't mean that the truth doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That means that absolute truth, one for all, doesn't exist.
Let's take an example.
So he's saying there is no truth, there's no one for all. He's taking postmodernism seriously, and your truth, the West's truth, is not my truth.
If you watch Russian television today, you'd think that Russia and America were about to go to war.
Yes, but the same if we are examining, if we are reading American press, we have the same impression.
Not really. I've just come back from America. You don't really get that impression. Do you think this is genuinely the case?
No, I think that now the situation is in Syria, for example, United States continuing to be unipolar or continuing to consider itself as unipolar power, it says no more Assad and Atlanticist powers.
By the way, the United States didn't say no more Assad. The Syrian people said no more Assad. The war there, the civil war there that was started, does not start because of the United States. It started, before the United States intervened. The United States only stepped in and supported the people who wanted to get rid of Assad well into the civil war.
The Western Europe repeats after Washington. We doesn't want any more Assad, but Putin, other civilization says.
Notice, counter to J.P. Morgan, to Jordan Peterson, he considers Russia a different civilization. So Jordan Peterson said, Russia is part of the West. We shouldn't be fighting them. They're part of the West. Not only they're part of the West, they're an important part of the West in that we're both fighting the left. The enemy is the left. Dugin doesn't see the enemy as the left. Dugin sees the West as the enemy, as a different civilization, as everything post-Enlightenment as a different civilization. And in that sense, Jordan Peterson, who tends to talk about individualism, I don't think he really truly is an individualist, but he talks about individualism, and Dugin are enemies. And yet, Jordan Peterson is willing to open the door and to welcome him in as part of the fight against the left. So you let the devil in. You let fascism 2.0 in the name of fighting the left. We're fighting the left. That's what matters.
Stop. Let have Assad. And after that, there is our nuclear and military power.
Now notice, he talks a lot about nuclear power. He's saying, we're a power. We have nukes. Be careful. We have nukes. Behind
Assad. So, and that is serious. If you are boss, you could not let the other decide, if you really is a boss, decide what to do in your realm of responsibility. It is conflict. And Russia says, no, you are not boss. You are not anymore boss. That's very serious. It is.
Now notice, you know, a lot of commentators in the United States think that the United States is fighting a proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. And that's the analysis, and this is really an American war. But you could flip that. And based on what he is saying, what Dugin is saying here, I think this is how the Russians see it.
We insist.
Russia is fighting a proxy war against the United States in Ukraine. Russia doesn't want to go up against the United States directly. But what it wants to do is chip away at American influence, and not just American military influence, but chip away at American cultural influence, at the ideas of, quote, modernity. And Ukraine is an opportunity for them to do it, and they know they can get away with it. They know they cannot be stopped because what he just said, they have nukes. We have nukes. You can't stop us. You can't stop us from interfering in Syria. You can't stop us from interfering in Ukraine. You can't stop us from achieving our aims because we have nukes and we would use them.
On multipolarity, and if behind us there is nuclear weapon,
Behind us there is nuclear weapon.
the iron will to defend, for example, in the little case of Assad, defend Assad. Assad is principally not because we have so much interest there. That is the question of who rules the world.
See? He says, it's not like we have so much interest in Syria. They do, but you know, it's for another time. Primarily the ports in the Mediterranean. But he says, it's not so much that we have a particular interest in Syria. It's not like we care about Assad. That's not the problem. The problem is we need to stand up to the United States. We need to make the United States clear that they don't run things. We need to engage in stopping the U.S., in pushing back against the U.S. So note that everything here, and this, I think, somewhat because I think they have a strong interest in Ukraine, but to some extent, yeah, the West is having too much influence on Ukraine. Ukrainians want democracy. They want freedom. They want maybe to join the EU. They might even want to join NATO. We can't allow that. And we have to push back not just against Ukrainian. We have to push back against American influence in the world. Because American influence in the world is the devil. Oops.
But that is the problem.
But
so that's possible war. Only war could decide really who is the boss.
Yeah, so only war can decide who is the boss. And the two people vying for being boss is the United States and Russia. And what he's suggesting is, until we have a war with the United States, we won't know who the boss is.
That's really a possibility.
If United States doesn't want to start a war, you should recognize, United States should recognize openly for all humanity, all mankind, that United States is not anymore unique master. So let recognize that there will be no war. But we understand our position is that we are going to fight up to the end in order to show to everybody that United States is not any more unique master. It's very serious, because we are seriously going to show and to confirm that we are entering in a multipolar world.
See, this is the goal. He's telling you. You don't have to listen to all these analysis, fight Jordan Peterson and all these other right-wing critics who are giving all kinds of excuses for Russia. They're saying, we are a superpower. We have nukes. We are going to push back against Americans. We're announcing that this is a multipolar world. We don't recognize America's dominance, and we will push against you everywhere and anywhere that we can until you recognize us, until you explicitly say, yes, Russia is a powerful nation with sphere of influence and a legitimate superpower. They want our recognition.
The situation in Syria, on Ukraine, and anywhere else, that's only the case to prove that. We don't want that, but we understand that if...
It's just a case to prove that. right? He said, we don't want any of these wars. We just need to prove to America that we're a superpower.
We will be not ready to pay all the price for that we could not gain.
And so they're willing to pay any price for that, otherwise they can't get it. They're willing to go all the way. This is the real danger in Putin. Now, note how pathetic all this is. Given that he comes from a country, as somebody said on the super chat, poorer than Italy. He comes from a country, you saw how well the T-72s did, a country that can't occupy Ukraine. It's losing a war.
So Ukraine and Syria are all about proving to America that they're not the boss.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. See?
Absolutely. That they are not unique boss.
Can I ask you a personal question? When you watch the news on Russian television, do you believe what you see?
Absolutely, because
Really? You're an intelligent man. Surely you can't believe
because
some of the most outlandish things.
no, absolutely. Postmodernism teaches us to understand, or sociology. I'm sociologist as well. And what is total fact, according to Dugin? Total fact. The founder of sociology, Emil Durkheim, affirmed that total fact, it is the fact the society believes in.
So total fact is what society believes in. So absolutely the news in Russia is true because people believe it.
So if enough people believe it, it'll become true.
No, the truth is the question of belief. And postmodernity shows that every so-called truth is the matter of believing. So we believe in what we do, we believe in what we say, and that is the only way to define the truth. The truth is the matter of belief. And that is not only our position, because when I see Western media, I ask myself how the people could lie in such way. They lie about everything in the world. But after that, I say to myself, stop, that is not lie. It is their truth.
But wait,
they are completely convinced that they are true.
So it's their truth. There is no such thing as truth. So here you're saying him actually using this postmodernism, there is no such thing as truth.
In the Western media, I'm a reporter. I go out on the ground. I report what I see. Nobody tells me from on high.
No.
The
There is no
editorial line
such
should
thing.
be.
The fact, it's always interpretation.
Fact is always interpretation. Fact is always interpretation.
There is no such things as a fact. Wittgenstein has proven that. There is no fact, there's only interpretation. You see because you interpret this or so. Our manner of...
This is right out of the German Romantics, right? He's not making this up. This is philosophy. This is what the 19th and 20th century philosophy taught us, right? You don't see the world out there. Everything is interpretation.
Thinking of any man, of any culture, of any civilization, it deals only with interpretation. You cannot see nothing without interpretation. What you see, it's interpretation.
I see you can argue that philosophically, but
it is not
if
practical.
if somebody flies an airplane and drops a bomb on a building in Aleppo, somebody's dropped that airplane. Somebody's dropped that bomb.
Who has fixed that? Whose airplane is it? What is the bomb? What is the quarter the bomb is falling on? What are the people?
Yeah.
And there begins our interpretation, because it is the war.
But
It is very difficult to go in to see and to prove. For you, any bomb falling is a Russian bomb. Any killed by Russian bomb should be an innocent civilian, and any harm that is done in the Aleppo or in the Syria is absolutely from the beginning. You have no idea that could be different, because you are real, normal Western man.
The real normal way. I mean, Bonnie says she really likes the point. I do too, because he's trying. He really is trying. He's struggling because he doesn't have the philosophical language. He's granting him the philosophy, and he's saying, but practically, I can see it. And Dugin says, no, you don't see anything. Everything is interpretation.
Western reporter, Western journalist, it is your truth to say, to presume, to be completely convinced the Russians are evil. So that they want
But that's where you're wrong.
also...
I spent many years studying Russian and learning to love Russia and all things Russian.
But nevertheless, that are our bombs that destroy innocent civilians everywhere.
I'm not saying they all are, but sometimes they are, right?
Never.
Never, you said.
No, only American and American marionettes of ISIS and the other Jabhat al-Nusra bombs are killing innocent civilians.
Because those are the only ones that are killing.
That's our interpretation, our vision.
But you can't really believe
That's his interpretation. And he views that as, quote, truth.
that. I mean, I don't believe it. I don't believe that Russia is responsible for all the destruction. Neither do I believe it's responsible for none of the destruction. I mean, it's just not credible.
No, but when we see Western media, we see when, for example, someone is a little bit on the other, try to say that maybe not in any case the Russian bombers that destroy the civilians, so it is cut. So maybe personally there are people who are with broader sense of understanding reality, but if we take the Western media, we see that normal reportage, normal observation of what is going on in Syria is completely biased by these preconceived ideas.
And I understand that, and I recognise that. But isn't it true that Russian television has seen that there is implicit bias in how people look and where they are, and they've taken it and multiplied it by 100.
We could speak on two levels.
Yeah.
If you affirm that the West says the truth and the Russia says lie, I would respond, Russia says truth.
Right.
Can you believe this guy?
Is absolute truth, and the West says lie.
Okay, so we're playing a chess game. If I say to you, Western journalists are often biased and mistaken, but they try to tell the truth, whereas Russian TV has gone through the other side.
No. If you say that,
and they're not even trying to tell the truth.
If you say that Western TV is sometimes biased, sometimes not, I would say Russian TV is sometimes biased, sometimes not. If you say we are sometimes not biased, but you are always biased, I would say exactly, you are sometimes biased, we are sometimes
so we're always
not biased.
exactly equal.
Absolutely, and that is multipolarity.
Right.
Nobody has monopoly on the truth. The truth is relative. I could accept that.
The truth is relative.
But only if you accept that. If you say our truth is absolute, I would respond immediately. Our truth is absolute. I don't believe that, and you don't believe it. Or maybe you believe. If you believe that your truth is absolute, you are normal Western man. But normal Western...
I don't believe anyone's truth is absolute.
Okay, we could agree on that at least.
All right, you guys exhausted? So there we have it. Again, the reason to do this is not to torture you aimlessly. The reason to do it is to try to understand our enemy, to try to understand what's going on in the world. This is the guy who everybody says, I don't have firsthand information about this, but everybody says is, Putin's brain, Putin's right-hand man, Putin's... he said in an interview that, I've read that there are periods in which he's very close to Putin, periods in which he's removed from Putin. But what he said is even when he's removed from Putin, even when he doesn't have direct influence on Putin, talks to Putin and so on, he has immense influence on him through other people. Dugin's books are studied in the military academy in Russia. His, quote, students are in political power in Russia. Many of the people you see in Russian television are people influenced by him. He is a superstar on Russian television. So we need to understand Thanks, Noel. Really appreciate the support. We need to understand our enemy. We need to understand what they're doing, what they're saying, where they come from. But we also need to be very, very wary, because many of these ideas, maybe not in this wackier form, maybe not in this exact way, but many of these ideas are the ideas that are growing in the American right. Many of these ideas are the ideas that are gaining influence in the American right. Again, maybe not exactly the same, maybe not as articulate and being articulated quite a nutty way. Maybe the American right doesn't accept postmodernism, but it accepts, primacy of consciousness. But their interpretation of Christianity is that God, there is one truth. And ultimately, I think Dugin believes in one truth, but it's not a truth out there. It's a truth in here. And how do you find that? It's not by mechanism of reason or science or knowledge. Remember what he said about science. He said science, right, creates a false reality. Science is the creation of the scientist. So I think we need to be wary. We need to be wary of these ideas. We need to be wary of these philosophical ideas. We need to be wary of their influence over us. And when you see just threads of this, and again, he is now being interviewed by all the right-wing media. And when you see Tucker Carlson run off to Budapest and interview, the leader of Budapest, whose name will come to me in a minute, Orban. Orban's influenced by this stuff. Orban, maybe not philosophical, maybe not committed, but he's influenced by all this stuff. And the American right today, they just had a CPAC. CPAC used to be the big conservative convention. I went there once and, did interviews and engaged with people and everything. CPAC recently went to Hungary. And in Hungary, they turned Orban into this hero. But Orban and Putin and elements within the Polish government, these are the kind of ideas that influence them. This is the philosophy that's driving them. And when we read the National Conservative Manifesto, a statement of principles, how many of those principles echo what Dugin has just said? Each ethnic group should have its own, every country, every nation should be able to have its own politics, its own identity, its own individuals don't make an appearance. Individual rights don't make an appearance. So, it's these ideas that we have to understand. Radio Zalaza, who's in Poland, I think, says Poland is not influenced by Dugin. Poland isn't, but intellectuals in Poland are. Maybe not directly by Dugin. And maybe a lot of the other intellectuals and a lot of the other people are not directly influenced by Dugin. But many intellectuals in Poland are influenced by these kind of ideas. Absolutely. I met some of them. Some leading politicians in Poland who reject the concept of individual rights out of hand. Nonsense on stilts. But pharma-collectivistic, pre-modern perspective. So this has influence out there. It has impact. And my job is to warn you and to prepare you and to encourage you to fight this influence. All right, let's do some Super Chat questions. By the way, we're about $450 remaining. We've raised about $200, so we're a long way from reaching a $650 goal. Radio Zalaza says everywhere in Europe. I agree, everywhere in Europe. But I think conservatives in Poland are just a little bit worse. Yeah, the rejection of individual rights by this Polish politician was not just Burke. It was a lot deeper than Burke. And of course, Burke is bad enough, but it was a lot deeper than Burke. All right, let's see. I mean, partially it's religion, right? And religion rejects individual rights and properly understood, taken seriously. And religion is strong in Eastern Europe, or at least parts of Eastern Europe. All right, Super Chat. So we're accepting Super Chat questions on pretty much anything. You can ask about this, you can ask about other stuff. $20 or more gets priority, and $20, but we're $450 short, so we're going to need a lot of $20 questions, or a lot of $50 questions, a lot of $100, $200 questions to get us to where we need to be. So I'd appreciate your support. All right, let's start with Liam. If you can see abstractions as clearly as a perceptual threat, it makes you more sensitive and vulnerable to the evil of the world that most people don't pick up explicitly. You see all the connections and all the evil, everything out there. I mean, I think that's right. I mean, that's what Ayn Rand to a large extent gives us, provides us. It provides us with that ability to see abstractions as threats, to see ideas as threats, to see philosophies as threats. I mean, Ayn Rand has really given us a tool set to be able to analyze the world and to be able to see what is good in it and what is evil. And most people are at the perceptual level, unfortunately. I mean, Ayn Rand has a brilliant essay called The Anti-Conceptual Mentality, where she talks about the fact that so many people are non-conceptual. They're still at the perceptual level. So they can only see a threat when somebody's running at them with a knife. But they can't see a threat of an idea, of a movement, of a philosophy. Oh, those are just abstract ideas. And pragmatism, which is a dominant philosophy in the US. And by the way, Dugin expresses his admiration for Dewey and for James and for the American pragmatists. Because what did the pragmatists share with him? A rejection of reality, a rejection of truth, of objective truth. So even though politically they were very different than him, he epistemologically, the pragmatists are very similar to him. So the pragmatism teaches Americans not to pay attention to principles, not to pay attention to abstractions, to live in the moment and in the concrete world. Oh, all right. All right, free trade. Thank you, Liam. Free trade for $20. Is Russia's invasion of Ukraine a valid reason for the U.S. government to outlaw trade between Russia and U.S. citizens? What are the correct criteria for trade embargoes? I think the correct criteria is that the country involved is a threat. It's a threat to you. And whether the Russian invasion of Ukraine makes Russia a threat to the United States, so that by trading with Russia, and since trade is win-win, you're bringing a win to Russia, whether that should be banned for national security reasons, right? Whether that should stop, that all trade with Russia should be stopped for national security reasons, I guess that is the question. And I don't think it's an easy question to answer. I suspect that in a rational world, it would be. I mean, the fact is that, the fact is that we view Russia as a threat here. We're arming the Ukrainians. We're sending them weapons. We're not selling them in a regular process. We're shipping them weapons, and we'll figure out later how they pay, because they're a threat to us. If they're not a threat to us, why are we behaving the way we are? So, look, in a true objectivist world, where the United States had a proper foreign policy, Russia would have never invaded Ukraine. But the world would be a completely different place. But so it's very hard to, in the mishmash of what the world is today, to not answer that question. But generally, I would say yes. And certainly if we're sanctioning individuals over there, which I don't think we should be, but we should, it's much more likely that we should ban trade with the country than sanction individuals. Although banning trade is, would sanction everybody. And in that sense, the most ludicrous thing in the world that's happening right now, which would never happen in even a semi-rational world, is the fact that Europe is buying natural gas and oil from the Russians. And at the same time, at war with them. Which is just bizarre. So it's really, really important to define the enemies properly. And it's really, really important to act consistently once they're being defined as enemies. And in this case, I think, given the circumstances where we are today, which I don't think we would be in a more rational world, you have to assume that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is an act of aggression that poses a threat to the United States, and therefore the United States should, and not a threat that involves the need for the United States to engage in military action, but enough to say Russia is an enemy. Because they're a nuclear power, we don't have anything really, we don't want to go to war with them, but we don't want to help them either, so we're not trading with them anymore. Oops. All right. Jeff says, he doesn't ask, he says, I would love to see you host a science show with Amanda Maxwell and Keith Lockridge. Yeah, maybe we can do that. I'd have to think about what I asked them. Jennifer says, do you believe that I really gave you this donation? I guess I do. But should I believe it? I don't know. I don't know. Is it your truth that you gave me the donation, or is it my truth that you gave it the donation? Maybe in this one rare case, our truths overlap, and you did give me the $20 donation, and it's true for both of us. I think that's the right answer. All right. Roland asks, is Dugin a D2 or an M2? I think he's an attempt at an M2. I definitely think these ideas are an attempt at an M2. There's an integrating philosophy here. There's an attempt at an integrating philosophy. It's an integration around the idea of some ancient knowledge, some ancient mystical knowledge, discovered through revelation by the people in charge. So yeah, it's definitely an M2 in this case, and a particular nasty case of M2. It's all, everything is integrated around this principle. Now it's not a particularly coherent M2. That is, there are simpler M2s and more coherent M2s, because this is a rambling M2, because there's also the postmodernism. The postmodernism element is certainly a D, and there is the cultural relativist part, which is also a kind of a D. So it's some ideas are very difficult to categorize in this way. But I'd say the dominant, the metaphysics and epistemology, the metaphysics certainly, are basically M2s. But it's not straightforward, and it's not clear cut because of the postmodernist element, and because of the God, what was the other one? Well, let's just stick to the postmodernist element. All right. So we've raised about $400, about $200. We raised about $250, so not even $400. God, we're way behind where we usually are after an hour and a half. Usually we're at like 600. Now I know yesterday we raised a lot of money, and you guys contributed a lot of money, but there are different people on today than there were yesterday. So hopefully some of you can step up and help us get to the 650. All right. Roland says, hi from Barcelona. The sun's just about to go down here. Have a great night, Roland. Michael says, if Putin loses badly in Ukraine, will he do something extreme to save face, like employing tactical nuclear weapons? I don't know. I don't think so. I still think that there are people in Russia, high up in Russia, who are pragmatic enough, who don't want to die, who don't want to commit suicide, that they would be willing to stop Putin for pressing the button, stop him from using tactical nukes. Dugin would use nukes. Dugin is like a religious mullah. He's like one of those people running Iran. He doesn't care because the individual doesn't matter. He doesn't care because his soul is eternal. He doesn't care because he believes this stuff. He's an M2 in that sense. He believes this stuff dearly, and if sacrifice is noble, sacrifice is great. And if we have to sacrifice a few million Russians in order to stand up to the United States, then it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. So part of the question is, to what extent do you believe Dugin is in charge? But if I were in NATO, if I were in charge of US forces in the world, I would be prepared for what would happen if the Russians used a technical nuke. And how would the United States respond? And what would escalation look like? And how do you basically take out Russia's nuclear capability as quickly and as thoroughly as possible? I mean, that is my whole focus would be right now. I don't think China's going to invade Taiwan right now. I think there's more of a likelihood that Putin uses a tactical nuke than there is China invading Taiwan in the next 2 years. So I would focus all of my attention on how do we respond? And is the response such? Can there be a response? Do we have the capabilities in the United States to basically neuter the Russian nuclear program? And they better be planning it now, and they better have forces on the ground now, and they better have the capacity to do it now, because otherwise we're in real danger. So I don't think, usually I used to say the communists would not use nukes because they were too attached to this world. But Dugin is a mystic. Putin, I don't know, but Dugin, the witch doctor, is a witch doctor. He doesn't care about death. Putin might care, and that's what we're counting on. We're counting on Putin caring. It's a risky proposition. Michael says, what was Hegel's addition to Kant that these Russian thinkers always pick up on? Well, I mean, I'm not an expert on Hegel or on Kant, but let me just say this. Hegel was the original nationalist. I mean, Hegel gave nationalism a philosophical voice. Hegel is bizarre, mystical, weird, unintelligible. But one of his ideas is, for Hegel, the individual doesn't matter. The individual is insignificant. What's significant is the collective consciousness. And one of the most important collective consciousnesses that there is the state. The state is an important unit. The individual is not. What matters is the state. And then, even more important than the state is God, is the oneness, the one in the whole, right? The whole universe is really just one consciousness, one God, one thing. Everything integrates into the one. But in integrating into the one, it integrates into smaller units, if you will. And an important unit there is the state. Now, Hegel also has the dialectic. I think the dialectic is less important for this in this context, but that I think is what contributes to nationalism, to German nationalism, to a particular form of German nationalism, to a mystical element in German German idealism and German nationalism, and that I think is what the right picks up on. The whole nationalist right is Hegelian in that sense. All right, Shazbot, what are the historical influences? Russian Orthodox, Slavophiles, and Europeans. Max Nordau, Jean Gunon, and Julius Evola on Aleksandr Dugin. Look, I'm not an expert. I don't know what the exact influence is. Dugin says that he's heavily influenced by Nordau, Gunon, and Evola. In what ways? You know, I took some notes about who these people are. So Nordau wrote a book in 1892. Nordau was a secular Jew who basically completely given up on Judaism and become just completely assimilated. But like Herzl, during the Dreyfus trial, realized that anti-Semitism was ingrained in Western civilization, that you couldn't get rid of it, and as a consequence, he became a Zionist. He wrote in 1892, let me just have to delete all this junk mail that keeps coming into my chat. Hide user from this channel. So Nordau even married a non-Jewish woman. You know, he basically rejected his Judaism, but became a Zionist. In 1892, he wrote a book called Degeneration. Degenerates. Remember what Jordan Peterson talked about? He talked about the degenerates of the left. He talked about these degenerates, degeneration of the left. This is all the same language. This is all the influence coming from the same place, right? So, and what the book about degeneration was, it was about the corruption of modernity. It was about the evil of modernity, how it corrupted the human soul, how it degenerated art, it degenerated human relationships, it degenerated love, it degenerated everything about modernity. Modernity was degenerate. The music, the painting, everything. And of course, the Nazis picked up on that term. Jordan Peterson has picked up on that term. And Dugin supposedly was heavily influenced by the book Degeneration. Okay. The second person mentioned is René Gunon, a French esoteric Christian traditionalist with a capital T, like Dugin, 1886 to 1951. Studied hedonism. Hinduism. And it was big into esoteric, mystical, and again, a massive critic of modernity and modernism. And a real mystic, esoteric, mystic Christian. And then finally, Julius Evola, 1898 to 1974, influenced by both the previous ones. Julius Evola was a fascist, supported the fascist regime of Mussolini. He believed in the what he called spiritual racism. So he believed in the aristocratic, the masculine, traditionalist with a capital T, heroic, and definitely a reactionary. Again, a rejection. One of his books is called The Revolt Against the Modern World, written in 1934. So we're not talking about critical race theory. We're talking about 1934. Really a revolt against capitalism, revolt of everything, the Enlightenment. All about this mythology of a golden age, of a pre-modern, primitive society where they knew the truth, where they connected with the world of spirits, and so all of this nonsense. War could be a spiritually fulfilling experience. That's from Julius Evola. Also, the progressives also believed in that. Crowley, the progressives, the American progressives. We have a traditionalist elite that has the ability to access power and knowledge through a hierarchical magic which differs from lower superstition and fraudulent forms of magic. So I believe these are people who believe in magic, they believe in superstitions, they believe in mysticism. They're primitive. These are people who are primitivists. They believe in the superior not, but in a sense, Platonists. You know, philosopher king who could commune with the other spirits, with the other world of forms. Really scary people. Really scary people. But they were all people who Dugin mentions as having influence on him. Having influence on him. Catherine, thank you for the support. Even Catherine is contributing because she realizes we've only raised $257, which is just, how do you say it? Pathetic. All right, Colt. All right, Jeff is coming to the rescue with 100 Canadian dollars. So Jeff cuts the line. He says, we love beaver here in Canada, Paul. Hopefully I'm thinking of the same reality of that statement. I hope you do. I hope you are. Yeah, this conversation is getting weird because we're all accessing our own realities. And one of the things that happens when you do that is communication completely breaks apart. Communication completely fails. All right, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the support, 100 Canadian dollars. Really appreciate it. We're now up to $335 that we have raised. All right, Colt says, I will definitely see how this presents a clear, I can definitely see how this presents a clear danger from the right. It seems to me that the real battle is going to be to convince better people on the right and the same people not to buy into stuff like this. Good work, Huron. Yes, I think so. I think the ultimate battle is between us, the rational, and all the irrationalists out there, whether it's crazy left or crazy right. So the real battle is between reason and mysticism. Mysticism of the left and mysticism of the right. The real battle is between primacy of consciousness and primacy of primacy of reality, right? Primacy of existence. And we're on the side of existence. The real battle is between reason and mysticism. We're on the side of reason. The real battle is between egoism and altruism. Altruism of the left and altruism of the right. Primacy of consciousness of the left, primacy of consciousness of the right. Mysticism of the left, mysticism of the right. And the real battle is between capitalism and statism. Statism of the left, statism of the right, fascism of the left, fascism of the right, socialism of the left, socialism of the right. We are not of the right and left, is my bottom line. We are the enemy of the right and the left. We are the enemy of these ideas. And we've got our fight cut out for us. I mean, it's a lot of work, guys, a lot of work. All right, we're now more than halfway to our goal. We've got $340 raised, so that's good. Stephen asks, he's got an other people's money question. Other people's money. 1, how do you reconcile Garfield's crude behavior with the virtues of the movie? 2, didn't the film brilliantly demonstrate there are no conflicts of interest? So 1, yeah, I mean, Garfield's crude behavior is an attempt by the playwright, this is based on a play, and then by the movie director, to undermine the heroism of Garfield. That is, it's a flaw in the movie, but it's consistent and it makes sense. So you can ultimately portray a consistently self-interested, good, productive, successful, happy person. You have to find a way to undermine him, to undercut him. And in this case, you undercut him more in his romantic behavior than his business behavior. You undermine him by having Danny DeVito play him. Short, bold, ugly guy. And then by Danny DeVito's character, Garfield, being crude and not knowing how to deal with a woman and treating women in a crude way And so you undermine him. That's because you can't have somebody who gets the economics right, which they do in other people's money, and is also a good guy and is also self-interested. That would be too much to ask. But it is one of my favorite movies. Highly recommended. Other People's Money. Best movie on finance ever. Didn't the film brilliantly demonstrate that? No conflict of interest. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it in many ways, it just brilliantly portrays, I think, how capitalism works, how it can work, how people benefit from it, how and how value is added and created even in places where you think it's not. Danks asks, can you comment on Dugin's video on Ukraine war? I haven't seen Dugin's video on the Ukraine war. Send me a link. Send me a link. I've seen a lot of Dugin's videos, but I haven't seen that. And I was looking for something more philosophical than just commentary on the war, but I'll look at it. Bonnie says, great analysis. Thank you. Is your conclusion that there's no reasoning with Putin? There's no reasoning with Putin. No. Do any Western leaders realize this? No. No, they can't conceive of it. But there's no reasoning with him. You have to out-strategize him. You have to outthink him. And luckily, his military is so pathetic that maybe he will just fail all by himself, right? Just all we have to do is provide support to the Ukrainians, and they'll crush the Russians. But as long as Putin is alive and as long as these ideas dominate Russia, Russia will be a threat. And as long as it has nukes, Russia will be a threat. It doesn't have to be Putin. It doesn't have to be this war in Ukraine. It can be, you know, one of the things mystics have is patience. They think long term because their life, one lifespan doesn't matter. So Russia will always be a threat to the West as long as it doesn't change its ideas and as long as it has nukes. Somebody says, provide him with the afterlife he wishes. I would have done that. I mean, I firmly believe in assassinations, and I would be assassinating Vladimir Putin. Colt says, sorry, Brooke, I must tell you that I don't exist. You're probably wondering how you got this money donated to you. No, I don't wonder. If you tell me you don't exist, then obviously you don't exist, because the you who told me you don't exist might have existed, but once you say you don't exist, you don't exist. And the money just showed up, just like all revelations happen and all miracles happen. So no problem here. No contradictions at all, Colt. We're all good. All right, Megan, these are the last two questions. If you want to get in and ask a question, get us over the, then now's the time to do it. Now's the time to do it. If you want to ask a question, you can do it. You can do it now. Catherine is enthused. She's a little sad because she's worried that she's not going to make it today. Which has happened recently already, right? This will be the second time, which, forces one to start wondering. Megan says, if my science created reality, I'd probably create experiments that don't need troubleshooting. Yeah, absolutely. And experiments where you already know the outcome. Why have this uncertainty about the outcome? Thanks, Megan. Paul, all right, this is the last two questions. Thanks for suffering through that guy for 2 hours on our behalf. Here's for a stiff drink. I appreciate it. I don't drink. Maybe that's why I can suffer through that. Mr. Muffin says, what would happen after Putin dies? Democracy? I doubt it. I doubt it. But it's going to be interesting to see if whatever elements there are in Russia that are better, that want some kind of democracy, whether they can be victorious. Because I fear that Dugin's ilk are dominant intellectually in Russia, that the better people have left, that Russian culture is dominated by this form of mysticism, this form of fanatical tribalism, nationalism, and that this is what dominates Russia today, and that democracy is out of the question. So, you know, Ayn Rand always thought that Russia was a horrible, mystical place, and that real values had no real chance in Russia. It seems like so far she's right. All right, Frank has stepped in with a $50 support. Let's see, maybe we need to break altruism down into transactional altruism, charity-like, and invested altruism, politically sought, just an idea. Well, I mean, I don't see how, if you understand what altruism really is, then I don't know if that is going to really help you, because I don't know that charity is altruism, necessarily. Altruism is the sacrifice of self. Altruism is the living for others, the negation of self. That's Augustine Comte's view of altruism. It's the negation of self. It's the negation of self for the other. The other is the goal, and I don't see how you break that up. I don't see what that, it's pretty clear. What we need to be with people is to clarify that altruism doesn't mean being nice to people. Altruism doesn't mean charity. Altruism doesn't mean helping your neighbor. Altruism means sacrificing yourself, sacrificing your values, giving them up for nothing. Radio Zaleza says, Ayn Rand saw people like Dugin in Russia personally. That's how she came up with the witch doctor archetype. I certainly think she saw people like that in Russia, yes. I certainly think that the Dugin type is a Russian type, and that it's all over Russia. I mean, as we saw from the influences Dugin, this kind of mysticism is all over Europe. But this particular combination, particularly with Russian Orthodox and the rejection of reality, and the nationalism, and at the same time kind of an imperialism, that is definitely a sense, something that's uniquely Russian. Scott says forced altruism versus benevolence. I don't buy forced altruism. I don't think forced altruism. I don't think forced altruism is a useful observation. Altruism, period. I don't care if it's forced or not. Altruism is evil, even if it's voluntary. The force is not what makes altruism bad. Force is a political issue. Altruism is a moral issue. And altruism is evil morally. I don't understand, Frank, what stepping stone theory is. I'm sorry. All right, we have a contribution from Sweden. Are there any limits at all on the type of weapons the U.S. should sell to allied countries under threat like Taiwan? Well, I think different countries should be treated differently, that not all of them. But if I were the United States, I would stealthily sell to Taiwan on nukes, because that would prevent a Chinese invasion. That is the one thing that will prevent a Chinese invasion, and that is give Taiwan the weapons to really defend themselves. So I think the United States should decide, depending on the threat that the country faces, depending on its strategic importance to the United States. I think all of those should determine what exactly the United States should do. And by the way, the United States should have sold Taiwan nukes a long time ago, when China was much less of a threat than it is today. It's much more difficult today than it was back then. So each country, you should make a strategic decision about what kind of weapons you want to sell them. All right. thanks everybody. Thanks for bearing with me while we listened to and watched Aleksandr Dugin. I hope I hope you accept it as a warning for what is going on in the world, right? Thanks to all the super chatters. Thanks for the support. Thanks to all of my monthly contributors. If you want to become a monthly contributor and help the show, then you can do so on Patreon as a Subscribestar. This is what funds my time to do the research, to listen to Dugin for hours, to analyze it here, to do a 2-hour show like we just did. All of that is funded by your monthly contributions and by the super chat here. Of course, if you watch the YouTube channel after the fact, you can click on that applaud button and make a contribution there as well. So feel free to do that on any video you find of mine. Thank you guys. I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a very different show. Now we'll see. Will more people show up for tomorrow's show than today? That's the question. But tomorrow's show is going to be on art and beauty. Art and beauty and their importance in your life and why you should devote real energy, real thought to that. Right? And so tomorrow, 3 o'clock, I might show some pictures of my home to show you examples of what I think is beautiful. And not just in art, but in design, in how to make the world you live in beautiful. All right, because all you've seen is this one corner of my office. Why did the camera move that way? I want you to be able to see the sculpture and the painting. There we go, that's better. All right, thanks guys. I will see you all tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And yeah, let's get more people here than we got today for a positive show. Oh, don't forget to like the show before you leave. Press that like button. Really helps with the algorithm on YouTube. So don't forget, I know a lot of you just forget. Just press the button. Thank you. Bye, everybody.